It was my first time entering Kenya as a Kenyan resident, and let me tell you something, fam. The feeling of queuing up in the line for Kenyan residents as opposed to queuing up in the line for visitors felt like the biggest flex in my life. I was so happy, I was so proud. I felt like I win the lottery. No, for real. I love to call myself a Kenyan resident. I love this country. I love the people. So yeah, I wish everyone else in the diaspora to have this feeling of coming home. It's so beautiful. Welcome, Karibu and Salam to another episode of Plan B, Back to Africa. My name is Weyni. If you're new to this channel, thanks for joining. In today's video, I want to share with you how I finally got my Kenyan residency, of which I'm ultimately proud of. Many of you have reached out to me after my video about living in Nairobi versus living in Addis Ababa and asked me, Weyni, how were you able to acquire Kenyan residency? So here we are, and I will explain the entire process, how much time it took me, how much money I spent. So make sure you stick to the end and let's dive straight into it. Now, if you want to reside and work in Kenya, you obviously need a permit to do so, like for any other country too. And there are different ways of acquiring Kenyan residency. One, for instance, is through marriage. However, I am going to focus on the residency acquired through work or investment. Depending on the type of work you plan to do or the sector you want to invest in Kenya, there are different classes of permits. And so let me just give you a brief overview of the relevant classes of permits. The Class A visa, for instance, is given to individuals who come to Kenya for prospecting or mining. And to do so, you need to have a license to mine in Kenya, and you need to prove a capital investment of a minimum 100,000 US dollars. Then there is the Class B visa, which is given to individuals who want to work in the field of agriculture or animal husbandry. And to qualify for this visa, you also need to prove that you have the necessary capital to afford or buy a land in Kenya. If you need a standard employment visa, then the Class D visa is probably the best option for you, and it is also the most common visa. With this visa, you are entitled to work for any company or even for the Kenyan government. Next in line, we have the specific trade, business and consultancy visa, also known as the Class G visa. The Class G visa is given to individuals who want to work and invest into any field of the Kenyan economy. However, to qualify for the Class G visa, you need to prove a minimum capital of 100,000 US dollars on your bank account. Last but not least, there is also the Class I visa, which is given to individuals who enter Kenya for charitable or religious purposes. And here also, to qualify for this visa, you have to prove that your activities will be beneficial for the country. So these are the relevant classes of permits that you can apply for if you want to work and live in Kenya. So in my case, there was actually only one class of permit which was of high interest, which is the Class G investors visa, because foreign nationals like me who want to run and own a company in Kenya are required to have an investor's Class G visa from the immigration department. However, as I said before, to qualify for this class of visa, you need to have a minimum of 100,000 US dollar on your Kenyan bank account, which I didn't have. So the big question here is, can you still register a company in Kenya and apply for a work and residence permit without having 100,000 US dollar on your bank account? And the answer is yes. But you need to find a trustworthy local business partner with whom you can register your company, and you need an exceptional lawyer who knows all the loopholes in the legal system. So obviously, before applying for any of those visas mentioned before, you need to register a company in Kenya. But you know what is the best part about it? You don't even have to travel to Kenya to register a company. You can do it completely online. Foreign nationals who want to register a company in Kenya are requested to do so via the website eCitizen, on which you can then obtain all the documents for your company registration, fill them out and submit them. So technically you can do the entire process on your own. All you need to do so is your passport, and you are good to go to register your company as a sole director, sole shareholder. And yeah, you know, it is very important that you comply with the Kenyan laws and regulations. And on top of that, you know, the entire application process can be lengthy, complicated. So I wanted to have expert assistance to avoid the chances of rejection after a lot of effort, money, and energy has been put into the process. Now, the question is, how long did it take me from the moment of registering my company up to the approval of my Kenyan residency? So I started the entire process of company registration and visa application with the help of my lawyer based in Nairobi in February this year. And it was finalized by the end of April, beginning of May. So that was when I traveled to Nairobi to submit my fingerprints. This was also a crazy story. The effort it took me to reach Nairobi was crazy. It really seemed like it was not meant to be at the beginning. Let me quickly tell you this story. So I first visited Kenya in the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, shortly before the corona pandemic broke out. And I took a trip with my kids from Addis Ababa to Mombasa. And at that time, German citizens and passport holders like me were allowed to enter Nairobi and Kenya in general with a visa on arrival. So me in my mind, when I was traveling to Nairobi this year, was still having the information that I can get a visa on arrival. Man, I was so wrong. I booked a flight with Turkish Airlines, went to the airport in Germany, and was not allowed to board the plane because I didn't have an A visa. So before you enter Kenya, before you, 3 days before you enter Kenya, you must minimum 3 days before apply for the e-visa. Otherwise, you will not be able to board the plane. It was a horrible experience. I think in all these years that I'm traveling, it was the first time that something like this happened to me. But the good thing was that Turkish Airlines, kudos, this video is not sponsored by Turkish Airlines, but let me give them their props that they deserve. So they were so kind to let me rebook my flight for free. And so I scheduled my flight for 3 days later and returned to the airport with an A visa. With the help of my lawyer, I was able to get it within 24 hours. I tell you, fam, having a great lawyer is key. And so I went back to the airport with my approved e-visa, just to be turned back again because the plane was overbooked. It was too full. And this time I got a compensation of a 600 euro and was able to take my flight 2 days later. I was shaking when I arrived at the airport for the third time, but we give thanks and praise to God. I was able to board my plane and finally fly and reach Nairobi. And you know what is the absolutely craziest thing? On my way back to Germany, the plane was overbooked again and I got another compensation. Anyway, on this trip, I was able to finalize the entire company registration process and I got my Kenyan residency endorsed. All of that within 3 months. And a few weeks later, I had to take a flight from the island of Zanzibar, where I travel to regularly, to Kenya, to Nairobi. And it was my first time entering Kenya as a Kenyan resident. And let me tell you something, fam. The feeling of queuing up in the line for Kenyan residents, as opposed to queuing up in the line for visitors felt like the biggest flex in my life. I was so happy. I was so proud. I felt like I win the lottery. No, for real. I love to call myself a Kenyan resident. I love this country. I love the people. So yeah, I wish everyone else in the diaspora to have this feeling of coming home. It's so beautiful. And yeah, so now to the question, how much money did I spend? So the entire process, including legal fees, costed me around 7,000 US dollar. But this includes the legal fees for my lawyer. This includes the government fees, taxes, health insurance, all of this. The entire work and residence permit is valid for a year, which is not much, to be honest. Many countries offer 2 years. To extend your work and residence permit costs currently 500,000 Kenyan shilling, which is around 3,000 US dollar. Unfortunately, again, only valid for a year. So the costs are quite high, to be honest. But I was told by my lawyer that there is a notice to reduce the fees and that the matter is already in court and a ruling is expected today, actually. So fingers crossed, because this is really quite high compared to other countries where for the same amount you get a residence and work permit valid for 2 years. Besides that, before registering a company in Kenya, you must know that the income tax for foreigners is extremely high. There's 30% of income tax. And yeah, so maybe countries like Mauritius are a better option for you. However, for me personally, Kenya is still the best option because I love this country. I really feel home in Nairobi, and you can really enjoy a good quality of life here. And what very few people know is that Kenya is also a very interesting and attractive tax base, because Kenya does not tax non-Kenyan sourced investment income. So you can live and reside in Kenya and you don't have to pay a single penny to the Kenyan tax authorities from the revenue that you generated overseas. So how amazing is that, please? Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Also, let me know if you have already registered a company in Kenya or if you plan to do so. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share my resources with you, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.